The transport ship slowly moved through space toward Kepler Station. Commander Jarnal Reeves looked out the small window at the massive space station ahead. It was bigger than any human structure he had ever seen. The station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in the darkness of space. Jarnal was tired. The journey from Earth had taken 3 weeks, even with the fastest human ship available. He rubbed his gray beard and checked his uniform one more time. Today would be his first day at the Galactic Naval Academy. He was the only human invited to join the Advanced Warfare Strategy course. The docking process was smooth and quiet. Jarnal gathered his few belongings and walked toward the airlock. The artificial gravity felt different here, lighter somehow. When the airlock opened, he saw his first aliens up close. 2 tall beings stood waiting for him. They had blue skin that looked like living crystal. Their faces were long and thin, with large silver eyes that seemed to glow from within. These were Valthrines, he remembered from his briefings. They were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. "Welcome to Kepler Station, Human Jarnal," said one of them. The voice was musical and soft. "I am Guide Veltar. Please follow me to your quarters." Jarnal followed the tall alien through corridors that seemed to be carved from single pieces of white stone. Everything was clean and smooth. There were no visible joints or bolts anywhere. The walls curved in ways that should not have been possible with normal construction methods. Other aliens moved through the corridors around them. Jarnal saw massive creatures that looked like walking tanks covered in natural armor plates. Those were the Korath, according to his files. There were also bird-like beings that seemed to float rather than walk. The Zephyrians. Each species moved with grace and purpose. "Your quarters are here," Guide Veltar said, stopping at a door that had no visible handle. The door simply slid open as they approached. "Classes begin at first cycle tomorrow. Do not be late." Jarnal's room was simple but comfortable. The bed was too soft for his liking, but it would work. He unpacked his things and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be important. The next morning, Jarnal found his way to the classroom. It was a huge round room with seats arranged in circles around a central space. A holographic projector hung from the ceiling like a metal flower. Jarnal took a seat near the back. Other students were already there. 12 different species, all gathered to learn about warfare and strategy. Jarnal counted them quietly. 3 Valthrines, 2 Korath, 2 Zephyrians, and representatives from species he had never seen before. Some looked like living plants. Others seemed to be made of metal and circuits. The instructor entered the room with flowing movements. It was a Valthrine female, taller than the others Jarnal had seen. She wore a uniform that seemed to be made of liquid silver. "I am Admiral Lyses," she said in that same musical voice. "Welcome to Advanced Fleet Combat Theory. Today we will examine optimal ship design for modern warfare." The holographic projector came to life. Images of sleek starships appeared in the air above them. The ships were beautiful. They looked more like works of art than weapons of war. Their hulls were smooth and curved, with no visible armor or external weapons. They seemed to glow with inner light. "These represent the current standard for galactic naval design," Admiral Lyses explained. "Notice the emphasis on energy efficiency and speed. Weapon systems are internal and powered by primary energy cores. Defensive systems rely entirely on shield generators." The alien students nodded in approval. Some took notes on devices that Jarnal did not recognize. The Korath delegate made clicking sounds that seemed to indicate agreement. The Zephyrians ruffled their feathers in what looked like excitement. "Speed is life in space combat," Admiral Lyses continued. "A ship that can move fast can choose when and where to fight. A ship with powerful shields can absorb enemy fire long enough to win. Heavy armor is wasteful and primitive. It slows ships down and wastes energy that could power better weapons or shields. More images appeared. Battle formations where sleek ships danced around each other like schools of fish. Energy beams and plasma bursts lit up space in beautiful colors. Ships that lost their shields were destroyed quickly and cleanly. Modern warfare is about precision and efficiency, Admiral Dyson said. One perfect shot can end the battle. Why waste resources on crude armor when shields can stop any attack? Why build slow, heavy ships when fast ships can avoid damage entirely? The alien students seemed very pleased with this explanation. They whispered among themselves in their various languages. Jarnal understood some of the words. They were talking about how logical and advanced this approach was. Jarnal raised his hand slowly. The classroom became quiet. All eyes turned to look at the human in the back row. Admiral Dezes looked surprised that anyone had a question so early in the lesson. "Yes, human Jarnal," she said. Jarnal stood up slowly. He looked around at all the alien faces watching him. Some seemed curious. Others looked annoyed that he had interrupted the lesson. "I have a question about your ship designs," Jarnal said in his rough voice. "Please ask your question," Admiral Dezes replied. Jarnal pointed at the holographic ships floating above them. The beautiful, sleek vessels that the aliens admired so much. "Why are your warships without armor here?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The silence in the room was complete. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the soft humming of the station's life support system seemed to pause. Admiral Dezes blinked her large silver eyes. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question?" "Why don't your ships have armor?" Jarnal asked again. "What happens when the shields fail?" The alien students looked at each other with confusion. The Korath delegate made a sound like rocks grinding together. One of the Zephyrians tilted its head almost completely sideways. "Shields do not fail," Admiral Dezes said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Modern shield technology is completely reliable." "But what if they do?" Jarnal pressed. "What if something goes wrong? What if the enemy has new weapons? What if there is a system failure?" The silence returned, heavier than before. Jarnal could see that his questions made no sense to these aliens. They looked at him like he was speaking in an ancient language that no one remembered. Admiral Dezes straightened her tall frame. "Human Jarnal, perhaps you do not understand how advanced galactic technology has become. We have moved beyond such primitive concerns." Jarnal sat back down, but his mind was already working. He was beginning to understand something important. These aliens had never learned to plan for failure. They had never learned to fight when everything went wrong. This was going to be a very interesting class. The next day's class started with tension in the air. Jarnal could feel the other students watching him as he entered the circular classroom. Admiral Doris stood at the central platform, her crystalline features showing what might have been annoyance. "Today, we will continue our discussion of modern fleet design," she announced. "But first, we should address yesterday's unusual questions." She gestured for Jarnal to stand. He rose slowly from his seat, feeling the weight of alien eyes upon him. "Human Jarnal has raised concerns about shield failure," Admiral Dezes said. "Perhaps he would like to explain his primitive thinking to the class." Jarnal cleared his throat. "It's not primitive thinking. It's survival thinking. Every system can break. Every weapon can be defeated. Every shield can fail. What do you do when that happens?" The Korath delegate, whose name was Thaxval, made his grinding rock sound again. "Human logic is flawed," he rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. "Our crystalline shields have operated for 3,000 years without failure. They cannot be broken." "Never?" Jarnal asked. "Not even by accident? What about power failures? What about damage to the generators?" "Impossible," chittered one of the Zephyrians. Her name was Swift Wing in Moonlight, though she told others to just call her Swift. Our shield matrices are powered by quantum cores. They cannot lose power. Jarnal looked around the room. So none of your species has ever had equipment fail? Nothing has ever broken down. No ship has ever been damaged in a way you didn't expect? The plant-like beings, called Verdani, rustled their leaves in what seemed like laughter. Human concepts are very strange, spoke their representative through a voice box that translated their chemical signals. Why build for failure when you can build for success? Admiral Vises gestured for calm. Human Jarnal, please explain your species' approach to ship design. Jarnal took a deep breath. We call it defense in depth. First, we have shields, yes, but we also have armor. Thick, layered metal plates that can stop projectiles and absorb energy blasts. Under the armor, we have bulkheads, sealed compartments that can be closed off if one section is damaged. But this makes ships slow and heavy, observed Swift. How can you fight effectively? We build bigger engines, Jarnal replied simply. And we accept that we might not be the fastest ships in space. But when the shooting starts, we're still there when the smoke clears. Admiral Tice's expression showed clear disapproval. Such designs waste enormous amounts of energy and resources. Why not simply build better shields? Because shields can be overwhelmed, Jarnal said. What happens when the enemy brings more firepower than your shields can handle? What happens when they develop new weapons that your shields can't stop? What happens when your shield generator takes a direct hit? The mechanical beings, called Nexus folk, spoke through electronic voices that sounded like music. Logical probability suggests that such scenarios are statistically negligible. Efficiency demands focusing resources on proven defensive systems. Statistically negligible, Jarnal repeated. Right up until it happens. Then statistics don't matter. Only survival matters. Dax's volume shifted his massive armored form. Humans think like prey animals. Always afraid. Always planning for defeat. True warriors plan for victory. We plan for both, Jarnal shot back. Victory when possible. Survival when victory isn't an option. Admiral Vises activated the holographic display again. Images of human warships appeared in the air. Compared to the elegant alien vessels, they looked crude and ugly. Thick armor plates covered every surface. Gun turrets stuck out like metal thorns. The ships looked like flying fortresses. These are human naval vessels, Admiral Vises announced. The alien students made various sounds of disgust and amusement. Notice the primitive design philosophy. Wasted space, inefficient energy distribution, obsolete kinetic weapons alongside energy systems. They look like space rocks with engines, Swift commented, her feathers rippling with what Jarnal thought might be laughter. Function over form, Jarnal said quietly. They're ugly, but they work. How can they work? Asked one of the Verdani. They must be incredibly slow. How do they avoid enemy fire? They don't, Jarnal answered. They take the hits and keep fighting. The room fell silent again. This concept seemed to break something in the aliens' minds. Admiral Vises spoke carefully. You are saying that human ships are designed to be damaged in battle? We're designed to be damaged and keep fighting, Jarnal corrected. Every human ship has backup systems for the backup systems. Multiple engine clusters, redundant power cores, separated ammunition storage, isolated command centers. But why? Demanded Thaxval. Why not simply build ships that cannot be damaged? Because there's no such thing, Jarnal said firmly. No shield is perfect. No armor is unbreakable. No plan survives contact with the enemy. You have to be ready for everything to go wrong. The Nexus folk representative tilted its metallic head. Human philosophy appears to be based on systemic pessimism. This seems inefficient for morale. It's not pessimism, Jarnal replied. It's realism. Hope for the best. Plan for the worst. When you expect everything to go wrong, you're never surprised. When things go right, you're ready to take advantage. Admiral Dizes looked frustrated. This level of redundancy must make your ships extremely expensive to build and maintain. More expensive than losing the ship entirely? Jarnal asked. More expensive than losing the crew? Dead ships don't cost anything to maintain because they're not there anymore. But if shields make ships invulnerable, began Swift. Nothing is invulnerable, Jarnal interrupted. Every technology can be defeated. Every defense can be overcome. Every strength can become a weakness. The moment you think you're invulnerable is the moment someone proves you wrong. The aliens exchanged looks among themselves. They were clearly struggling with these concepts. Their entire military philosophy was based on perfecting their technology until failure became impossible. The idea of planning for failure seemed alien to them in ways that went beyond mere species differences. Admiral Dizes straightened to her full height. Human Jarnal, your theories are interesting, but they represent a fundamental misunderstanding of modern warfare. Galactic civilization has evolved beyond such crude approaches. Has it? Jarnal asked quietly. When was the last time any of your fleets faced a real test? When was the last time your perfect shields met something they couldn't handle? Such scenarios do not occur, Admiral Dizes stated firmly. Our technology is proven and reliable. Jarnal nodded slowly. Then I hope for your sake that it stays that way. But history teaches us that everything changes. Everything evolves. And the species that survive are the ones who are ready when the rules change. Admiral Dizes turned away from him. Tomorrow we will demonstrate proper fleet tactics using modern vessels. Perhaps practical application will help clarify these concepts. But as the class ended, Jarnal noticed something. Some of the alien students were looking thoughtful. Not convinced, but thoughtful. Maybe his words had planted seeds of doubt in their perfect certainty. As he walked back to his quarters, Jarnal wondered if these aliens had ever faced real danger. Had they ever fought an enemy that could truly threaten them? Or had they grown so comfortable in their technological superiority that they had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival? He suspected they might learn the answer to that question sooner than any of them expected. Admiral Dizes stood at the center of the classroom, her silver eyes reflecting the soft light from the holographic projectors. Today's lesson was supposed to be about tactical formations. But first, she had a different announcement. Human Jarnal has requested time to present his species' naval philosophy, she said with barely hidden distaste. While I consider such primitive approaches to be of limited educational value, intellectual curiosity demands that we examine all perspectives, even obsolete ones. Jarnal rose from his seat and walked to the center platform. He carried a small data pad that looked crude compared to the crystal storage devices the aliens used. Several students made soft sounds that might have been amusement. Thank you, Admiral, Jarnal said simply. He connected his device to the holographic system. I want to show you something. A ship from our third fleet, the UN Stalingrad. The image that appeared drew gasps from around the room. If the alien ships looked like artistic sculptures, the Stalingrad looked like a metal mountain that had been given engines. It was massive, angular, and covered in thick armor plates that made it look more like a fortress than a spaceship. This is ugly, Swift commented, her feathers rippling with distaste. Yes, it is, Jarnal agreed. It was designed by engineers, not artists. Every piece serves a function. He pointed to different sections of the ship. 14 layers of composite armor. Reactive plating that explodes outward to stop incoming projectiles. Redundant hull sections that can be sealed independently. 4 separate engine clusters, 3 independent power cores, 6 backup command centers. Thak's volume made his grinding sound. Wasteful. Our ships accomplished the same protection with elegant shield matrices. This ship fought in the Centauri border wars, Jarnal continued, against enemies with technology more advanced than ours. I was there. I saw what happened. He activated the combat recording. The hologram changed to show space filled with explosions and energy beams. Ships moved through the chaos like dancers in a deadly ballet. This is the Battle of Kepler's Edge, Jarnal narrated. Human Third Fleet against Syndicate attack ships. The enemy had weapons that could penetrate our shields in seconds. The alien students watched with growing interest as sleek enemy ships tore through human formations. Ship after ship exploded in brilliant flashes of light. But then, the camera focused on one vessel, still fighting in the middle of the destruction. The Stalingrad, Jarnal said quietly. The massive human ship was a ruin. Its shields had failed early in the battle. Energy beams had carved deep channels in its armor. Entire sections of the hull were missing or glowing red-hot from plasma strikes. But it was still shooting back. Impossible, whispered one of the Verdani. No ship can survive that level of damage. Watch, Jarnal said. The recording showed a Syndicate cruiser making a close attack run on the Stalingrad. Enemy plasma cannon blasted straight through the human ship's forward armor, penetrating deep into the interior. By all logic, the ship should have exploded. Instead, internal blast doors slammed shut. Emergency systems activated. The ship's guns continued firing. Compartmentalized design, Jarnal explained. Each section can be sealed off and continue operating independently. Damage to one area doesn't spread to others. Admiral Theises leaned forward. But surely the crew in the damaged sections were killed, yes, Jarnal said without emotion. War kills people. The question is whether their deaths accomplish anything or whether the whole ship dies with them. The recording continued. More enemy ships attacked the Stalingrad. Each hit should have been fatal. The ship's central hull was breached. One of its engine clusters exploded completely. Fires burned inside the armor where atmosphere still remained. How is it still functioning? Demanded Thak's Vol. Backup systems, Jarnal replied. When the main engines were destroyed, secondary engines took over. When the primary power core was damaged, backup cores activated. When the bridge was hit, command transferred to the auxiliary control center. The alien students watched in fascinated horror as the human ship refused to die. It absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any of their vessels instantly. But more than that, it kept fighting back. Now watch this part, Jarnal said. A Syndicate battleship moved in for the killing blow. It was 3 times the size of the Stalingrad and undamaged. Its weapons charged for a final barrage that would finish the human ship. The Stalingrad turned to meet it head-on. The enemy fired everything it had. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes hammered into the human ship's already ruined hull. For a moment, the Stalingrad disappeared in a cloud of explosions and burning metal. When the smoke cleared, the human ship was still there. Barely. More than half its structure was gone. It looked like someone had taken a giant bite out of its side. But its guns were still working. How? Swift breathed. They rebuilt their targeting systems using parts from the cafeteria computers, Jarnal said. The gun crews were working in vacuum because life support had failed. They were using emergency oxygen tanks and fighting in spacesuits. The recording showed the Stalingrad's final action. Its main guns fired one last time. The shots struck the Syndicate battleship shield generators at point-blank range. The enemy shields failed, and the human ship rammed into the alien vessel at full speed. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire battle zone. The hologram faded to black. The The classroom was completely silent. The Stalingrad was destroyed, Jarnal said finally. But it took the enemy flagship with it. And more importantly, it bought time for the rest of our fleet to retreat and regroup. We lost the battle but saved the colony. 700,000 civilians lived because one ugly ship refused to die quietly. Admiral Dizes spoke carefully. This is instructive, but surely such extreme measures are unnecessary with proper shield technology? The Syndicate had new weapons, Jarnal replied. Weapons specifically designed to overwhelm our shields. They had studied our technology and found its weakness. Our shields were useless. Then you should have retreated when your defenses failed, suggested one of the Nexus folk. And let them destroy the colony? Jarnal shook his head. Sometimes retreat isn't an option. Sometimes you have to hold the line no matter what. But fighting damaged ships is inefficient, protested Swift. Better to preserve your forces for the next battle. Tell that to the families on Kepler Colony, Jarnal said quietly. Tell them their lives weren't worth one ugly ship and its crew. He looked around the room at all the alien faces. This is why we build redundancy. Not because we expect to lose, but because when everything goes wrong, we still have options. Your ships are beautiful and efficient, but what happens when your perfect shields meet imperfect reality? Thak's volume shifted uncomfortably in his armored form. Such scenarios are highly unlikely. So was the Syndicate developing anti-shield weapons? Jarnal replied. Until they did. Every advantage is temporary. Every strength can become a weakness. The only constant is change. Admiral Dizes deactivated the holographic system. While this crude approach may have historical interest, modern galactic warfare has evolved beyond such barbaric methods. But Jarnal noticed something in her voice. A small note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. He had planted a seed of doubt. I hope you're right, he said. I really do. But hope isn't a strategy. And pride comes before the fall. As the other students filed out of the classroom, several of them gave Jarnal long, thoughtful looks. Swift paused beside him. That ship, she said quietly. The humans who died on it. They knew they wouldn't survive? Yes, Jarnal replied. And they fought anyway? Yes. Swift tilted her head in that distinctive way her species had. Why? Jarnal thought for a moment before answering. Because someone had to. Because it was the right thing to do. Because the alternative was letting innocent people die. Swift said nothing more, but her feathers had stopped rippling. She looked very serious as she left the room. Admiral Dizes remained behind, studying the empty space where the hologram had been. You find their sacrifice disturbing, Jarnal observed. I find it wasteful, she replied. But her voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Jarnal said. Or maybe it was the most important thing those people ever did. History will judge. He gathered his simple datapad and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. Admiral, I have one question for you. Yes? When was the last time any of your perfect ships faced a real enemy? One that could actually threaten them? Admiral Dizes said nothing, but her silver eyes followed him as he left the room, and her expression was troubled. The alarm started as a low hum that quickly rose to a piercing wail. Admiral Dizes stood frozen at her podium as red lights flashed throughout the classroom. Emergency announcements echoed through the station speakers in 12 different languages. All personnel to emergency stations. Priority Alpha Alert. This is not a drill. Jarnal was already on his feet, his old military instincts taking over. Around him, the alien students looked confused and frightened. Most of them had never heard a real combat alarm. Admiral Dizes received a message on her crystal communicator. Her elegant features went pale as she listened. Void sector emergency. she announced to the class. Unknown hostiles have engaged 3 Allied fleets. All available ships are ordered to immediate response. Unknown hostiles? Vax volume rumbled. What faction would dare attack Alliance space? Not a faction, Admiral Dizes replied, her voice tight with worry. The initial reports suggest Reaper drones. The silence that followed was different from the classroom silences of the past days. This was the silence of fear. Swift's feathers pressed flat against her body. Reapers are myths. Stories to frighten children. The Sindori fleet thinks otherwise, Admiral Dizes said grimly. They've already lost 4 ships. Jarnal stepped forward. What exactly are Reaper drones? Admiral Dizes looked at him with surprise. Ancient automated warships from the predecessor civilization. They've been dormant for thousands of years in the deep void regions. Military historians study them, but no one has seen active units since the early galactic expansion. Until now, Jarnal said quietly. Admiral Dizes activated her communicator again. This is Admiral Dizes requesting immediate departure clearance for task force response. What ships do we have available? Jarnal asked. The training squadron. 5 vessels representing different Allied technologies. Her silver eyes met his. Including your human ship. 20 minutes later, Jarnal stood on the bridge of the UEN Verdun, a heavy cruiser that served as the human representative to the Academy. Unlike the sleek alien vessels around it, the Verdun looked exactly like what it was, a weapon built for war. Captain Sarah Chen, the ship's commander, reviewed the tactical data streaming in from the battle zone. It's not good, sir, she told Jarnal. The Reapers seem to be adapting to our allies' weapons in real time. Adapting how? Jarnal asked. Watch this. Chun brought up a recording from the Sindori fleet. First engagement, their shields stopped the Reaper weapons completely. Second engagement, same weapons, 50% penetration. Third engagement, total shield failure. Jarnal studied the data. They're learning. Every shot they take, every shot they receive, they adapt. By the 4th exchange, our allies' weapons were useless, and their shields offered no protection. The Verdun shook slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace. The void sector stretched before them, full of debris and the bright flashes of energy weapons. 3 massive Reaper drones moved through the battle zone like dark angels of death. Each Reaper was a kilometer long and shaped like a twisted dagger. Their hulls were black metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved with unnatural grace for such large objects, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Task Force, this is Admiral Dizes aboard the Starlight, came the communication. Form up in standard engagement formation. We will demonstrate proper alliance tactics. The alien ships moved into position with perfect precision. The Voltharine cruiser Starlight led the formation, its crystalline hull gleaming like a jewel. Behind it came the Korath battleship Imwall, heavily armored but built around shield technology. The Zephyrian destroyer Wingcutter danced on the formation's flank, its speed and agility its primary defense. Captain, Jarnal said quietly to Chun, keep us back about 5,000 kilometers. I want to see how this plays out, sir. Trust me. The Allied task force engaged the nearest Reaper with textbook precision. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes lanced out from the alien ships, striking the ancient drone's hull. For a moment, it seemed like the attack was working. The Reaper's shields flared and sparked under the assault. Then the machine returned fire. Its weapons were unlike anything in the current galactic arsenal. Beams of dark energy that seemed to bend space itself around them. Where they struck the Allied ship's shields, reality twisted and warped. Starlight reports Meyer shield drain, came the tactical update. No serious damage. Continuing attack. The second exchange was different. The Reaper's weapons had changed frequency, wavelength, and modulation. The same shields that had stopped the first attack barely slowed the second. "This is impossible." Admiral Tice's voice crackled over the comm. "Ironwall, increase shield power to maximum." The Korath battleship's shields blazed brighter, but the Reaper's third attack punched through them like they weren't there. Dark energy beams carved deep wounds in the ship's hull. "Ironwall is taking serious damage," came the panicked report. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. We're losing atmosphere. Wind cutter, attack pattern Gamma," Admiral Tice ordered. "Use your speed advantage." The Zephyrian destroyer accelerated to incredible velocity, trying to outrun the Reaper's targeting systems. For a few seconds, it worked. The drone's weapons couldn't track fast enough to hit the dancing ship. Then the Reaper fired a spread of smaller projectiles that moved even faster than the wind cutter. The destroyer simply vanished in a flash of light. "All ships, emergency retreat," Admiral Tice commanded. "We need to regroup and—" The Starlight's transmission cut off as another Reaper appeared behind the formation. This one fired a different type of weapon entirely. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse that overloaded every system on the Volthrene cruiser. The beautiful ship went dark and began drifting helplessly. "Captain Chun," Jarnal said calmly, "take us in." "Sir, those things just destroyed 3 advanced warships in under 5 minutes." "I know. That's why we're going in. Someone has to pull survivors out of this mess." The Verdun accelerated toward the battle zone, its thick hull plates glowing dully in the light of exploding ships. Unlike the graceful alien vessels, it moved like what it was, a battering ram with engines. "Incoming transmission from the lead Reaper," reported the communications officer. "It's scanning us." "Let it scan," Jarnal replied. "Weapons, what do we have?" "Kinetic cannons, plasma batteries, nuclear missiles, and about 3 dozen close defense systems," replied the weapons officer. "Old-fashioned human weapons," Chen observed. Exactly. Things that haven't been used in galactic warfare for centuries. Let's see if these ancient machines have any data on primitive human weaponry." The Reaper finished its scan and attacked. Its dark energy weapons lanced out toward the Verdun with the same power that had shredded the alien ships. The beams struck the human ship's shields and did almost nothing. "Minimal shield drain," reported the tactical officer with surprise. "Whatever frequency they're using, our shields are barely affected." "Because our shields are 300 years out of date," Jarnal grinned. "Fire all weapons." The Verdun opened up with everything it had. Kinetic rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Plasma bolts that use century-old technology. Nuclear missiles with primitive guidance systems. The Reaper's defenses, perfectly adapted to counter modern galactic weapons, had no idea how to handle such crude attacks. Kinetic rounds punched through its shields like they weren't there. Plasma bolts burned ugly holes in its perfect hull. "Target the second Reaper," Jarnal ordered. "And someone get me a communication line to any survivors." The battle that followed wasn't elegant. It wasn't efficient. It was brutal, ugly, and determined. The Verdun took hit after hit as the Reapers tried to adapt to human weapons. Its shields failed. Its armor was breached. Systems overloaded and caught fire. But it kept fighting. When the shields died, the armor held. When sections of armor were blown away, internal bulkheads sealed the breaches. When the main guns were destroyed, secondary weapons took over. When the bridge was hit, command transferred to the backup control center. One by one, the ancient Reapers fell to weapons they had never encountered before. Weapons that were too simple for their advanced adaptive systems to understand. When the last Reaper exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the Verdun hung in space like a broken toy. Half its hull was gone. It was venting atmosphere from dozens of breaches. But its engines still worked, and its weapons were still functional. "Captain Chun," Jarnal said as damage reports flooded in, "begin rescue operations. And send a message to all surviving ships. Gather on us." "Sir," Chun said quietly. "How did you know?" Jarnal looked out at the debris field that had been 3 modern warships. "Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Sometimes crude and simple beats elegant and complex." He activated the ship's general communication system. "This is Commander Jarnal aboard the UEN Verdun. All Alliance survivors, converge on our position. We're going home." In the distance, escape pods from the destroyed alien ships moved toward the ugly, battered human cruiser. It wasn't much to look at, but it was alive when everything else was dead. And sometimes, that was enough. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Theises walked slowly through the corridors of Kepler Station toward the medical bay. Her left arm was in a crystal healing brace, and her normally perfect uniform showed the wear of emergency evacuation. The escape from her destroyed ship had not been gentle. The medical bay was crowded with survivors from all the damaged vessels. Korath medics worked alongside Zephyrian doctors and human nurses, treating injuries from species they had only read about in textbooks. War, it seemed, was a universal language of pain. She found Jarnal in a bed near the back of the bay, his chest wrapped in bandages that covered radiation burns from his ship's damaged reactor. He was awake, staring at a datapad that showed casualty reports and damage assessments. "Commander," she said quietly. Jarnal looked up. His weathered face showed no surprise at her visit. "Admiral, how are your people?" 17 dead from the starlight. 43 wounded. She paused. The Einwohl lost 86 crew members. The wind cutter. Everyone aboard was killed instantly. "I'm sorry for your losses," Jarnal said, and she could hear that he meant it. "Your ship saved 327 lives," Admiral Theises continued. "Crew members from all 3 of our vessels. Your ugly, primitive ship pulled them out of space when their beautiful, advanced vessels failed them." Jarnal set down his datapad. The Verdun did what she was built to do. She kept going when everything went wrong. Admiral Theises pulled up a chair beside his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the medical bay filled the silence. Soft conversations, medical equipment humming, the occasional call for assistance. "I've been thinking about your questions," she said finally. "About armor and redundancy and planning for failure. And the Reapers adapted to our weapons in real time. Every shot we fired, they learned. Every defensive frequency we used, they countered. Our advanced technology became useless within minutes." Jarnal nodded. But they couldn't adapt to weapons they had never seen before. Primitive human technology that was already obsolete when they were first built. "Your kinetic cannons were 300 years out of date," Admiral Theises said. "Your plasma systems use frequency modulations that we abandoned centuries ago as inefficient." Inefficient, yes, but unknown. The Reapers had no data on such crude weapons. Admiral Theises looked at her crystal healing brace. "My people have become so focused on perfection that we forgot about diversity. We standardized everything, optimized everything, made everything efficient and beautiful. And predictable," Jarnal added. "Yes, predictable." She met his eyes. "When the Reapers learned our patterns, we had no alternatives. No backup plans. No redundancy. What will you do now?" Admiral Theises was quiet for a moment. "The Alliance Council is meeting to discuss new defensive strategies. There's talk of incorporating alternative approaches to ship design." "Ugly approaches, you mean?" "Survivable approaches," she corrected. "I'm recommending a complete review of our military philosophy, and I want you to lead it." Jarnal raised an eyebrow. "Me? You asked why our warships had no armor." It was the right question. The question that could have saved lives if we had listened. I'm just one human officer. You're the human officer who understood something we all missed. That perfection is fragile. That elegance can be a weakness. That sometimes the crude solution is the right solution. Admiral Lyses stood up slowly, favoring her injured side. The Academy wants to offer you a permanent teaching position. A new course in what they're calling survival-based strategic design. That's a terrible name, Jarnal said with a slight smile. You can call it whatever you want. The important thing is that future officers learn what we should have known all along. 6 months later, Jarnal stood at the center of the same circular classroom where he had first asked his question about armor. But now the room was different. The walls displayed images of ships from a dozen different species, all showing various approaches to military design. Some were sleek and modern. Others were crude and functional. All of them represented different ways of thinking about survival. The students were different too. Still mostly aliens, but now they included representatives from species that had previously considered their technology too primitive for the Academy. Humans sat beside Volthrines. Korath officers discussed strategy with beings whose names Jarnal was still learning to pronounce. Welcome to Applied Survival Doctrine. Jarnal began, using the name he had chosen for his course. Before we start, I want to ask you all a question. The students leaned forward, eager to hear from the human who had become famous throughout Alliance space for his role in the Reaper battle. Who can tell me the most important rule of combat engineering? A young Volthrine officer raised her hand. Build the best possible defensive systems? Close, but not quite. A Kara student tried next. Maximize firepower and speed? Also close. Swift, who had requested a transfer to study under Jarnal, tilted her head thoughtfully. Assume everything will go wrong? Getting warmer. Anyone else? Admiral Lyses, who sat in the back row as an observer, spoke up. Plan not just for victory, but for survival when victory is impossible. Exactly, Jarnal said. But there's something even more fundamental than that. The most important rule is this. There is no perfect solution. Every strength has a weakness. Every advantage has a cost. Every technology can be countered. He activated the holographic display. Images of various ships appeared, including the rebuilt Verdun, now showing scars from the Reaper battle as badges of honor. Your job as officers is not to build perfect ships or perfect strategies. Your job is to build ships and strategies that can adapt, survive, and keep fighting even when perfection fails. A student from a species Jarnal had never seen before raised what might have been a hand. But surely some approaches are objectively better than others? Are they? Jarnal asked. The Reapers were objectively superior to anything we faced them with. More advanced, more powerful, more intelligent. They should have won easily, but they lost, observed Swift. They lost because they were too perfect, too specialized, too adapted to fighting modern threats. When they met ancient, primitive weapons, their perfection became their weakness. Jarnal walked around the classroom, looking at each student. This doesn't mean you should abandon advanced technology. It means you should understand its limitations. Build redundancy. Plan for failure. Always have a backup plan for your backup plan. He paused at the holographic display and called up the image of the destroyed Reaper drones. These machines were built by a civilization that thought they had achieved perfection. They built weapons that could adapt to any threat, defenses that could counter any attack. And then they went extinct. Why? Asked the Korath student. We don't know for certain, but I suspect they became too dependent on their perfect technology. When something came along that their perfection couldn't handle, they had no alternatives, no crew backups, no ugly solutions. Admiral Lyses spoke from the back. The investigation teams found Reaper shipyards still operating in deep space. Billions of drones, all identical, all perfectly adapted to fight the wars of 1,000 years ago. Perfect solutions for yesterday's problems, Jarnal said, while the galaxy moved on around them. He turned off the holographic display and faced his students. Your homework for next week is simple. I want each of you to design a ship that violates every principle of modern engineering. Make it ugly. Make it crude. Make it inefficient. But make it capable of fighting and surviving when everything else fails. As the class filed out, Swift approached the podium. Commander, I've been thinking about what you said. About planning for failure. Yes? It's not really about expecting to lose, is it? It's about being ready for anything. Jarnal smiled. Now you're learning. Admiral Theises waited until the other students had left before approaching. How do you think they're doing? Better than I expected, Jarnal admitted. It's hard to change thinking patterns that have worked for thousands of years, but necessary. Yes, the galaxy is a dangerous place. It's full of unknowns and surprises. The species that survive are the ones who are ready for anything. Admiral Theises looked at the empty classroom. I received a report yesterday. Long-range scouts have detected movement in 3 more predecessor sites. Ancient machines awakening after millennia of dormancy. Jarnal nodded grimly. Then we better hope our students learn fast. The next test might be sooner than we think. He gathered his simple datapad and headed for the door. But at the threshold, he turned back one more time. Admiral, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really here? Sitting in on my classes, I mean. Admiral Theises considered the question for a moment. Because I want to understand how to think like a human. How to plan for impossible things and survive them. How to keep fighting when logic says you should surrender. And what have you learned? That survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It's about being the most stubborn, the most adaptable, the most willing to try stupid solutions when smart ones fail. Jarnal laughed. Now you're thinking like a human. As he walked through the corridors of Kepler Station toward his quarters, Jarnal reflected on the changes 6 months had brought. The station was different now. Busier, more diverse.